This is a self-revision video for Cell Structure Organization Chapter 1. So the two main overarching themes of this chapter is about the cell structures found in the plant and animal cells, as well as the specialized cells, tissues and organs part, which is basically about how cells they group together from tissues, and then tissues group together from organs to form organ systems, and how they specialize from stem cells. Yeah, that's basically all. And how their structure relates to their function, which is a central part of bio. So the first learning requirement on this is to identify cell structures, including the organelles and membrane systems. Yeah, so and we need to be able to give their function. So first up will be the chloroplast. We need to say that the chloroplast contains chlorophyll, and then they can trap light and convert it to chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. For the cell surface membrane, one important key we'll take note of is partially permeable. They say that the cell surface membrane is partially permeable, so that it's able to control the substances moving in and out of the cell, or the substances exiting or entering the cell. Yeah. So the third one will be the cell wall. So the cell wall has two main functions: is to protect the cell from injury, as well as to give the plant cell a fixed shape. So let me explain the fixed shape part. So about the fixed shape part, the reason the cell has a fixed shape is because when the plant cell actually loses water, when it actually moves out of the water moves out of the cell through osmosis, it becomes plasmolysed. And although the cytoplasm pulls away from the cell wall, it still maintains roughly the same shape. It just becomes flaccid. On top of that, when it's in a hypotonic solution, and water potential of the water potential outside of the plant cell is higher than the cell, higher than the inside of the cell. Water moves in by osmosis. There's net movement of water inside of the cell by osmosis, but actually this doesn't change the shape of it, because the cell wall is actually inelastic, or you can say inflexible, and it resists an increase in turgor pressure or water volume, and then it's able to become turgid, and it also prevents it from bursting, which also helps to prevent it from injury in that sense. At the same time, it also maintains the same typical plant cell shape. It does not swell too much. It basically still looks like a plant cell, so that's why I think it maintains a fixed shape. Yeah. And of course, I feel that the cytoplasm does not have a lot of functions, but basically what the cytoplasm is that it's the site of all the enzymatic reactions and the chemical processes in the cell. Yeah, the chemical reactions in the cell. And it contains all the organelles such as the mitochondria and so on and so forth. So the cell vacuoles actually have different functions in both plant and animal cells. Both do the role of storing nutrients or storing maybe amino acids or glucose or sugars. Whenever they're needed, the cell is able to obtain these substances from which are stored inside the vacuole. So for animals, that's basically their function. They are temporary and numerous and small vacuoles which help to store some basic nutrients. But for plants, they have an added function which is creating a water potential gradient between the cell sap as well as the soil solution in the case of root hair cells. So this will allow water to move into the cell through osmosis, so it can absorb water effectively. So I think that one's a later part of the chapter. Yeah. So part B will be about nucleus. Yeah, basically nucleus, it just plays a role in cell division, because the nucleus contains all the genetic information to the cell. So all the chromosomes is located inside the cell. Chromosomes, yes, but in interface it will be chromatin threads, but basically the genetic information is inside the cell. And then it also plays an essential role in controlling the activities that occur inside the cell. So like let's say the cell sustains injury, is able to repair itself thanks to the nucleus, and the red blood cells do not have the nucleus, therefore they are unable to repair themselves and get destroyed in the spleen because they get worn out and cannot repair themselves. For the endoplasmic reticulum, there are two parts, the RAR and SER. So the RAR has ribosomes attached to it, and ribosomes synthesize proteins, which is over here. So as they synthesize proteins, they also need to transport them from the RAR to the Golgi apparatus or Golgi body. And how they do this is they pinch off when the proteins are synthesized. The RAR pinches off a vesicle which is transported to the Golgi apparatus. Yeah, that's basically all. So the SCR carries out the synthesis of fats and steroids. So one example of a steroid is the hormone testosterone, and it also carries out detoxification. It converts harmful substances into harmless substances. So let's say alcohol. Alcohol is actually destroyed in the liver. It's converted to harmless products for respiration, aerobic respiration, and this is because the liver has a lot of SCR. And how I like to differentiate these two is the SCR does not have any ribosomes. It looks really smooth, and ARIA is quite rough. It has a lot of ribosomes attached to it. But I find that sometimes we're unable to differentiate between the SCR as well as the Golgi body. For me, I find that the Golgi body, whenever it's further away from the cell and it looks like a bit like a pancake, I would kind of tell that it's a Golgi body. So this one looks like a pancake. It's further from the nucleus. It's not really attached to the nucleus, so I will conclude that's the Golgi body. And if it's attached to the nucleus and it's smooth, then that's definitely the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Yeah, so basically that's all. So for the mitochondria, it's just the site of aerobic respiration. So the mitochondria carries out aerobic respiration to release energy for cellular processes or life processes. The Golgi body, there's three keywords: chemically modifies, stores, and repackages. So the function is basically it receives the vesicles from the rough endoplasmic reticulum. It chemically modifies, stores, and repackages these proteins, and then secrete pinch off vesicles, which is transported to the cell surface membrane for secretion outside of the cell. And actually this process is called exocytosis, and the vesicles actually fuse with the cell surface membrane to release these proteins outside of the cell. So for ribosomes, synthesizing proteins, but those that are present freely in the cytoplasm, they synthesize proteins that are used by the cell itself, but those attached to the RAR synthesize proteins that are used outside the cell, because as I've mentioned, the vesicles from the Golgi apparatus actually fuse with the cell surface membrane and release all those proteins outside the cell. Therefore, they're not used by the cell itself. So we've done A, B, C. So basically, for typical animal and plant cells, there are 4 differences that I've learned from the syllabus. So plant cells versus animal cells. So plant cells, they have chloroplasts and therefore they have chlorophyll, while animal cells do not have chloroplasts. The next one will be about centrioles. Plant cells do not have centrioles, while the animal cells have centrioles, and centrioles play an important role in cell division, which we'll find out later in the chapter on cell division. The third difference would be that plant cells have cell walls, but animals do not have cell walls. And the final difference will be that animal cells have small and numerous vacuoles, while plants actually have a large central vacuole, so they're actually located in the center of the cell. Or for animals, they're just dispersed around. They're tiny ones that can be destroyed anytime to obtain nutrients. They're also temporary, while plants are permanent. So there are 3 specialized cells that we learn about. So first one will be the root hair cells. So root hair cells, xylem vessels, and red blood cells, there are 3 main functions of each that we can relate to their structure. So for root hair cells, they have many large, many long and narrow protrusions, so that it can increase the surface area to volume ratio of the root hair cells, so that we can increase the rate of absorption of water and dissolve mineral salts into the cell. Yeah, so it makes the cell better at absorbing things. And I think the keyword will be to say faster, because if we say more absorption, it doesn't really mean much. And then the second one will be the presence of the cell membrane. The presence of the cell membrane actually prevents the cell sap from leaking out the cell. And this links to another function, the same function. The cell sap has a high concentration of mineral ions or dissolved mineral salts like sodium plus and chloride. So this actually lowers greatly lowers the water potential of the cell sap, so that there'll be a creation of a water potential gradient between the cell sap and the soil solution. So the soil solution has a higher water potential than the cell sap, so it will have a net movement of water into the cell. So basically, it's to establish water potential gradient, so water is able to be absorbed efficiently by the cell. And then finally, the root hair cells have a large number of mitochondria, because they need to carry out a higher rate of aerobic respiration to release a large amount of energy, so they can actively transport dissolved mineral salts against a concentration gradient, because they have a very high, in fact higher concentration of the mineral salts inside the cell sap. So for xylem vessels, the first structure that can be linked to the function is the fact that they are bundled together. So they're bundled together so that they can provide mechanical support to the plant, so that it does not collapse easily when water flows through it. Another function is, another structure will be that the walls have lignin on them, so this actually helps to strengthen the walls and provide mechanical support to the plant, so it does not collapse easily. This is quite similar. So the third one is that they have long hollow xylem tubes laid end to end, and at the same time it does not have protoplasm, and protoplasm is actually the cytoplasm, the nucleus and other organelles. So it does not have the protoplasm and has the long hollow tubes laid end to end, in order to allow the cell to conduct or transport dissolved mineral salts and water from the roots to the aerial parts of the plant, which is the stem and the leaves. Without obstruction, it facilitates this without obstruction, so it'll be more efficient. Yeah. So for red blood cells, it's just three major things. So red blood cells have no nucleus for a reason. They have no nucleus is to allow the red blood cell to be able to have the red blood cells to have more hemoglobin, so it can bind reversibly to more oxygen molecules and increase the rate of transport of oxygen from the lungs to the other parts of the body that need it. Another important part is that it has a circular biconcave shape. This increases the surface area to volume ratio of the red blood cell, which allows faster absorption of oxygen molecule at the lungs and faster release of oxygen, faster diffusion of oxygen out of the red blood cell to the cells that need it, and the other parts of the body. The final thing is that it has hemoglobin. It has hemoglobin. So it's hemoglobin, so it's allowed to bind reversibly to this to oxygen. Because if it binds irreversibly, it will not be able to release it, and our body cannot get the oxygen. So it actually facilitates the transport of oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body. So to be differentiate cell, tissue, organ system, I don't think it's that bad. So cell is just the basic unit of life. The tissue is basically a group of similar cells working together to achieve a function. So that can be like perhaps like maybe muscles, like maybe the muscle fiber. So one muscle fiber consists of many muscle cells. So this can be seen in the heart. So heart muscle cells can work together to form a tissue, heart muscle tissue. Yeah, and the common function is to contract. And for organs, it's many tissues working together for a common function. Yeah. An organ system just many organs working together to perform the same function. Yeah, so that's basically the end of this first chapter. And I think from what I hear myself, I don't really remember the content. Yeah. I really have to work on my bio.